Who are the most noteworthy IDPs from the AFC and NFC West for 2025? Today, my special guest, Bobby Reynolds from the IDP Show, and I will be answering just that very question. Bobby and I are diving deep into these two divisions that are loaded with talent, upside, and some serious league-winning potential. Whether you're eyeing breakout stars, looking for value picks, or just trying to stay ahead of your league competition, we've got you covered. All that and a lot more on this edition of the IDP After Show.
This is the IDP After Show.
I get an opportunity to do a lot of very fun episodes throughout the year here on the IDP After Show, but I think some of my favorite episodes that I get to be a part of are these divisional previews. Maybe it's the in-depth analysis of these teams outside of some of the obvious stars. Maybe it's exciting to think about what happened this season for these players as the hopium is kicking in here in June. Or maybe it's getting to chat a little football with some great dudes. Today, I get to talk a little football with one of those great dudes, a man who loves disc golf, a man who loves his mower thoughts, Mr. Bobby Reynolds. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on and talking a little football here with me today. How have you been?
Man, what an intro. That was beautiful, Jeff. I do love disc golf. I just mowed for hours and hours yesterday for like the third time in probably 7 to 10 days because we just have had a massive amount of rain. But now that you got disc golf in my head, it makes me just want to wrap this up real quick and get to the course. But no, I'm glad to be here today. Glad to pod with you. This is an episode that I will have a good time doing, a little AFC West, a little NFC West talk. Get to talk about my Rams. We'll talk for 30 minutes about 7 of the teams, and then for the next half of the episode, we'll talk about Braden Fisk. We'll talk about Jared Verse. We'll talk about the Rams and have a good time. But no, I appreciate you having me on. This will be a good time, Jeff. A good friend, a longtime fan, a good dude to have around the IDP show. We just got done talking about how long Jeff has been involved with the IDP show, even the Big 3 IDP podcast. Jeff knows what that is. Back in the day, did a lot of prep work for us. So the IDP show would not exist without old Jeff. So we appreciate you, buddy.
I appreciate those kind words, sir. So now that I'm going to go cut some onions, so get going here. So, Bobby, on this episode of the IDP After Show, we're going to take a look at some players that we really like, or maybe who are kind of going a little unnoticed at this time of year for the most part. And as we look at the upcoming season in the AFC and NFC West, we're going to take a look at 16-ish players, one player from each team, and then why do we think we like them this season a little more than most. So let's jump right in with the AFC West and the Denver Broncos. And who do you got as a player that you're excited about this season?
Yeah, just a guy that I want to talk about that doesn't get a lot of accolades really outside of normal kind of NFL talk is Pat Surtain, a defensive back that is really, really impressive. I mean, in my eyes, I think Pat Surtain is probably a top 5 cornerback in the league, maybe a top 3 cornerback in the league. And I know historically speaking, Darrelle Revis has kind of ruined us to this extent about, Revis Island and all these guys that aren't necessarily targeted on the NFL field because they're so good, their coverage skills are so amazing that quarterbacks are worried to throw their way. But I really think that Pat Surtain is a guy that I don't necessarily want to go and spend a lot for. It's not really somebody that I'm trying to attain long-term in Dynasty or anything. But especially as us at the IDP show get more entrenched every single year with the best balls. Shout out Harm, shout out Andrew Preston, shout out you, Jeff. I mean, we got tons of these best balls going so that they'll help us with ADP down the road. But also fast draft. You've got a lot of these quick 6-round drafts that are happening that, best ball and IDP are starting to link arms more and more as the years go by. And I don't think that Surtain is a guy that you're really spending too much for in either of those formats. I think he's somebody that we don't really need to forget. Last year, 147 points overall in Big 3 scoring, 9.2 points per game last year in 2024. But definitely has his pop weeks, 39.25 points in week 5. He had 17 points in week 8. And then again, 15 points week 15, and then 13 points in week 17. So, again, nothing to go crazy about, and we can sit here and talk about linebackers, and we can talk about defensive ends and stuff, but you came to the IDP show to talk about the depths of IDP, to talk about, every corner of the defense. And Pat Surtain is just a guy that is really, really good. And I think as he ages, it's just going to be a guy that we need to pay more attention to in IDP. What do you think there, Jeff?
You kind of nailed it for me too. I feel that he is a better NFL player probably than a fantasy asset for many managers right now, just because he's kind of getting treated as that alpha. And it's kind of, and Johnny the Greek would attest to this, like, you're going to want to play the guy opposite of him just because, like, he's going to get picked on more and more. I like Surtain as a player. I think he's got that swag to him. He's definitely got that like top 5 DB in the league for sure. If I'm going to be spending a pick on a defensive back for the Broncos this year, it's probably going to be Ji'Ayir Brown, just because I really like his skill set and I like him playing in the nickel. He's going to kind of have that Mike Sanistrill type season, I think, this year for them, just because the Broncos have a lockdown defense. They're probably the overall number 1 defensive team going into the season. And a big reason for that is their pass rushers and their corners kind of make everything happen. So they got a great group there. So I love Surtain as a player. Like you said, I'm probably not going to go out of my way to really acquire too many shares of him, just because that he's not going to be kind of volatile from week to week. So maybe like a great best ball type play, but season long, probably a little tougher for me.
Yeah, good pull on Barron too, because as a rookie, he's liable to get picked on a little bit more this year. And you're exactly right with that Mikey Sanistrill role that they maybe envision him playing. That could be pretty primo for him in his rookie year. And Mikey Sanistrill, another guy who in Adams ranks, I'll have to pull and see where he is, but he's got to be top 10, probably top 15 DB right now in Dynasty. So the Denver defense is going to be really, really fun to watch this year. That's a very ascending squad, not only defensively but offensively as well.
Yeah, I think Vance Joseph really has that unit clicking. He's got his pieces in place. I think they built it the right way. They built from the interior out. They took best player available in the drafts, and now that defense is ready to roll. And I think that's going to make that offense be very efficient this year. Bo Nix isn't going to have to be the gunslinger to keep in games. I think they can win a lot of like low scoring games. And then when you play in that AFC West, when you got Mahomes and you got Herbert, and now even like with the Raiders probably being better than we've seen the Raiders being, defense is going to win championships. So
love that.
I kind of cheated here. I know we were only supposed to do one player, but I couldn't pick between the two. So I'm going to go ahead and pick both of these guys here. I'm going to take both defensive edges here for the Broncos, Nick Bonnito and Jonathan Cooper. They're eerily similar in production last year. Both played right around 750 snaps. Both had really strong PFF grades. Both had double-digit sacks, lots of hurries, lots of hits. And right now, like, there really isn't a difference in my mind for these two players. But ADP, and you mentioned the D-up drafts just a little bit ago, Bonnito is going right now as the 33rd overall player, which is pretty high. I mean, that's a 3rd round pick in many leagues, but I know in those fast drafts, when we have those D-ups, we only have 10. So he's into that right around that 34 turn. But Jonathan Cooper right now is the 87th player overall in those D-up drafts, going undrafted a lot of those times. And so if I can get a discount on a Jonathan Cooper, I know the draft capital is not quite there as it is with Bonnito, but man, the production. Cooper last season played 820 snaps. He's got a 71.8 PFF grade. He had 13 sacks, 9 hits, 39 hurries, and 49 tackles. So he has a higher tackle floor than Bonnito did. And so, I'm kind of in on Jonathan Cooper at a discount to repeat this year. The Broncos really didn't add anyone in free agency or the draft at the position. They did last year with a guy I really like, with Jonah Ellis in the 3rd round. I think he's going to kind of be a more rotational play. And I can see Cooper and Bonnito being, those 700-800 snap guys once again this season. So if I had to pick one, I'm probably going to go with Cooper just because of the discount in price. But I can't fault anyone for, being savvy last year and picking up Bonnito on the waivers after week 2, week 3. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on there, Jeff. In Dynasty, Bonnito's probably the flashier name just because I think he's a little bit younger. Bonnito's about 25 years old. Cooper, I think, is 27. So both in peak ages right there as far as dynasty is concerned. Maybe even Bonnito a touch earlier than maybe what his peak could potentially be. I agree with you in the best balls. I do think Bonnito is coming off the board a touch earlier than I feel comfortable kind of drafting him, because really Bonnito and Cooper had similar seasons. A lot of sacks last year, a lot of production out of those two guys. And I agree with what you're saying as well, that you got to love that Denver didn't really do much in terms of edges in the draft. I mean, it's pretty much going to be a rinse and repeat for 2025 of what we saw in 2024. Jonathan Cooper as well, I think is a spot on. It's a great call. I mean, everybody knows Bonnito. That was kind of a guy that Adam and Josh both were really high on last year, but Cooper is a guy that I still feel like is a value. 2023 points per game, 12.2, 11.7 points per game in 2024. Tons of sacks last season, gets really, really good tackles as well. So also doesn't leave you, goose egg like a Josh Hines Allen sometimes. If he doesn't get you a sack, he's got a pretty hefty tackle floor. Jonathan Cooper, could you get him for a third right now? Could you send a 26th third for Jonathan Cooper?
I think that would be an easy get, to be honest. I think that's an easy ask for me. Yeah.
I think I'd be pretty comfortable doing that. You think about some of the guys that were going off in 25 this year, maybe some Mike Greens, maybe some James Pierces, that type of guy in 2025. I would be fine to pull a 26th third for a guy like Jonathan Cooper, who's still kind of young. You've got a 2 to 3 year window probably left for Jonathan Cooper. And, he's not going to be the Bonnito manager right now is liable to want to back in first, early second for Bonnito. And that's probably not a pick that I'm willing to move right now for a guy like Bonnito. But we'll take the discount, Jonathan Cooper. That's a good pull, Jeff.
Bobby, if you had Bonnito and someone offered you a first, is that a snap accept in your mind?
Shoot him off. I shoot him off. I'll do that trade in a heartbeat. I think there's certain guys in IDP as far as edge rushers are concerned. You've got your Bosas, you've got your Myles Garretts, you've got your your Will Anderson in my eyes. I think you've got a couple other guys that are kind of knocking on that door. You've got Crosby, who's kind of on the back end of it now, maybe TJ Watt as well. But then you've got guys like Jared Verse maybe working his way in. What do you think about Aiden Hutchinson? To me, Bonnito doesn't really belong in that category. To me, Bonnito belongs way more in that Josh Hines Allen type category. He's kind of on that Brian Burns. Will he ever ascend and be like just a full-on edge one for us? Maybe. But to me, he feels more in that edge 10 to edge 20 range. As your edge 1, you're a little skeptical, but if Bonnito's your edge 2 in Dynasty, you're feeling a lot better. So, it's a roundabout way of answering. If I can pull a first out of many IDPs, I'm probably trying to do that.
Would you rather have Abdul Carter or Bonnito?
Abdul Carter okay. For sure. I haven't seen it out of Abdul Carter yet, but man, I have a feeling that when that guy is unleashed, it's gonna be hard to ever attain him in Dynasty.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna get to see that this season, but I think after 2026 season, I think we're gonna get a chance to. Your buy low window is gonna be gone on him. So
it's closing
quick. Yeah. All right, so moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs, and kind of a polarizing player for a lot of people in IDP right now. Bobby, you picked Nick Bolton.
I did.
Yeah.
If you've watched the IDP show for any amount of time, maybe even back to the Big 3 days, you know that I love Nick Bolton. Adam hates Nick Bolton, and that's fine. It's good to have differing opinions in the Sode Shack, because that's why you listen, for the hollering and the disagreeing and the if everybody thought the same about everything, this would be a pretty vanilla world that we live in. But Nick Bolton, man, that 2021 production is still something. If you rostered him, if you managed Nick Bolton in 2021, man, you're still chasing those heights. I mean, it wasn't crazy high. It was only, what was it here, 11 points per game. So it wasn't. it wasn't insane, 11.7 points per game, but even into 2022 is when it started really heating up. 16 points per game. Everybody's still chasing that. 10.9 points per game in 23, 13.9 points per game in 2024. I think the Nick Bolton, it just depends on the setup. It depends on where he's going in best ball. It depends on how much you value him in Dynasty. I just think that Nick Bolton is a good linebacker. I think he's very efficient. Shout out Macri. If you ever check into Macri's efficiency model in terms of tackling, Bolton has always been a leader in that, especially those early years of Nick Bolton's career. So Adam has Nick Bolton right now as the linebacker 7 in Dynasty. And a little bit of that, I'm sure Adam is going to say, because that's driven based off of where people in IDP have him, not necessarily where Adam might have him. Everybody really values Nick Bolton. People don't like drafting Nick Bolton too early in the best balls because they feel like they're worried about Drew Tranquil or Leo Chenal. But here we are working on year 2 of Tranquil, year 3 or 4 of Chenal at this point, and it just hasn't happened. Nick Bolton is a guy that I'm probably, now that he's locked up long-term with the Chiefs, I'm kind of circling back around just to try to, if I don't have him, what's the temperature? What's the ask right now on a guy like Nick Bolton? Because I think Nick Bolton is just kind of a locked and loaded LB1 for us for the next 3 years, probably somewhere in that range. Am I out of whack here, Jeff, on my evaluation?
No, I'm totally in line. No, I'm totally in alignment with you on this. And, and this is one of those things where one of the very few times Adam and I disagree. I really like Bolton, and I remember last year taking him pretty early in a draft and just getting some razz from him about, oh, that's too early and stuff like that. But like you said, Steve Spagnuolo's done a lot of things with the linebackers in Kansas City. We've seen that LB2 role, like you mentioned with Chenal and with Tranquil, and they're kind of you don't feel good about starting either of those, but Bolton has been the guy that's been the consistent piece there week in and week out. And I don't see that changing. And like you said, they locked him up long-term, they're invested in him, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I totally have him in the top 10 of my linebacker rankings right now. I'm pretty confident if he's my LB1, I'm feeling pretty good.
Mm-hmm. So. I agree. Love that. Thank you for the reassurance there, Jeff. Makes me
no problem. Better. We'll start a support group. So, all right, I'm going to jump up to the defensive line here and not going Chris Jones, but I'm going to go with George Karlaftis. He played 831 snaps last season. That was best or ninth best among all defensive edges last season. Had a pretty solid PFF score with a 68.4. Rewarded us with 8 sacks, 21 hits, 32 hurries, and 27 tackles. So pretty solid numbers out of the former first-round pick in 2022. And right now he's heading into that magical 3rd year. He's playing on the same line with Chris Jones, where he makes everyone better. But they also added Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee this last year. So I think that's going to also help the entire defensive unit. Just add one more guy to draw some attention to. And with Karlaftis, the one thing I really like is he had 32 hurries. If he can turn an eighth of those hurries into a sack, we're looking at a 12, 13 sack season, it's hard to chase sacks. It's hard to chase interceptions, as we know, playing in the IDP world. But I think that's a really attainable number. That's like one extra half a second that becomes a sack, or things like that. So I see that well within the range. Going into his 3rd year, he's had 2 seasons of off-season conditioning, 2 seasons of NFL programming. He's into the system. He's got that, he's got the frame and everything. And now, that 3rd year breakout that we talk about with wide receivers, I think it happens more so on the defensive side, just because the game is so much faster on the defensive side of the ball, and just takes those players so much more time to acclimate to it, that I really like Karlaftis as kind of not really a breakout, because he's already had that, but I think is a step forward season for him. So
yeah, that's a good call. I'll tell you one thing though that I don't like about Karlaftis is quite opposed to Jonathan Cooper. Even last episode, the IDP show, myself, Josh, and Adam had talked about Trayvon Walker, a guy that if he doesn't get you a sack, has a pretty good tackle floor. Karlaftis at times, his tackle floor can be a little low. I mean, you look at his 2024 season, quite a few games with 1 tackle, 2 tackles, 3 tackles. Now, I will say, Karlaftis played really, really well in the postseason. He had basically every single game that he played was a double-digit game. He had his most impressive game, obviously, came in the divisional round against Houston. 5 tackles, 3 sacks, 40.35 points in Big Three scoring. So if he can move that into the regular season, if he can increase the points per game a little bit by honestly not so much getting the sacks for me, but more so doing other things. Let's get some tackles, some forced fumbles, some fumble recoveries. If we can keep the snap percentage up as well, Karlaftis can do what you're expecting, Jeff. He can definitely take a little bit of a step here in year 3. Karlaftis, another guy I'm probably trading if I can in Dynasty. Like if somebody's calling and the price is what I feel is going to be profit for me in IDP, I'm probably going to get off of a guy like Karlaftis because I don't see him as ever being elite. I really see him more in that, Alex Highsmith type category, that kind of range of will he ever ascend to be any better than like a back end DN2? I don't really know. But much like Jonathan Cooper and Bonnito, the Chiefs really need Karlaftis this year because FAU's not really doing much. There's nobody left in free agency in terms of edges. So Karlaftis, as long as he can stay healthy, his snap share is going to be massive in 2025.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with the opportunity. There is no one that's going to take him off the field.
Yeah.
There's no one on the team right now. Like you said, there's no one in free agency unless they make some sort of blockbuster trade, but I don't see that happening with anyone at this point in time. So I just, going into his 3rd year, playing 830 snaps last season, a player who ascended pretty well into the playoffs. Like you said, maybe we can carry that over into a more consistent play during the regular season. And I'm not touting Karlaftis as a DN1. I'm really pleased if he's my DN2, ecstatic if he's my DN3 on my team.
Yeah.
He's a player that probably got drafted late second in rookie startups 2 years ago. So if you can get a second plus back, I think I'm with you on moving him. That's a return on investment. So
give me this one real quick, Jeff. Just some quick answers. Karlaftis or Will McDonald in Dynasty?
I'm going to go Karlaftis.
All right, Karlaftis or Alex Highsmith?
I'm going to go Highsmith on that one just because playing opposite TJ Watt, I think that defensive line gets a lot of attention.
Okay.
Whereas Karlaftis really only has Pat Jones taking attention away.
Okay.
So,
all right, 2 more. Karlaftis or Nolan Smith?
I'm probably going to go Nolan Smith, just playing on a better defensive line. And he plays opposite Jalex Hunt, so that's going to be...
Yeah, that's fun. All right, last one. Karlaftis or James Pierce Jr., rookie out of Tennessee?
I'm going to take Karlaftis.
Yeah, I think you were spot on with Adam on all those. I think he wanted Nolan Smith more, then Alex Highsmith, then Karlaftis, Will McDonald, and James Pierce Jr. So theidpshow.com, get in there, get in Adam's ranks. You can check out his best balls. You can check out his dynasty ranks. But I think I'm with you on all those. Pretty close, similar styles for all those guys.
Yeah, agree. And like you said there, you mentioned it when we were talking about Denver's defensive ends too. It's like there's this top 10 tier of like really established high-end defensive ends that we want. And then there's like this next tier of about 20 guys that's very interchangeable.
Yeah.
And, not to talk anyone off any of those players. You've been doing this long enough to know that like if players are in on a guy or managers are in on a player, there's a world where all of those are correct answers. So
yeah, those top 10 guys that you're talking about, those are the guys in IDP that I don't trade unless it's something stupid. You're giving me 2 high first, you're giving me 3 high first, just something astronomical. I'm not moving a guy like a Myles Garrett, Will Anderson, that top tier type. Anybody after that top 10 is fair game, because what are the odds of a George Karlaftis ever making it to that elite category of edges. They're going to be very serviceable. He's going to have a long career in the NFL. But in IDP, I just never really tried to overvalue a guy like that.
Not only becoming a defensive end one, but jumping all of the guys that are in front of him too. Who is your defensive end one right now? It's got to be like a Will Anderson type player, right? Like youth.
Yeah. I love I love the Will Anderson type. I think we're fading Micah Parsons a little bit too much. I mean, Micah's probably my I don't know. Travis Hunter might be my overall IDP one, but Micah Parsons is probably my edge one right now. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you look at the age category, you're definitely getting some of these older Maxx Crosbys, and TJ Watt's getting a little bit older. Myles Garrett's getting a little bit older. They're still elite, and Josh talked about it on the last episode that if you're not a contender or if you are a contender is going to kind of dictate what you do with a guy like Danielle Hunter or TJ Watt or one of these, 30-year-olds midseason. If you're not contending, ship a guy like TJ Watt off for a high piece in 26 or 27. Or if you are contending, maybe go knock on the Danielle Hunter manager's door midseason and just kind of see what the temperature check is, because a guy like that only really has probably a couple more years left at best. And that's if TJ Watt can stay healthy at this point. So, yeah, you're right.
Be signed.
Yeah. That's true. Good call.
So, all right, we're going to kind of pick up our pace here a little bit, move through some of these teams a little bit quicker because we do have to talk about the Rams for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
that's
true. That's
contractual obligation. So we got to do that. So let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders. And Bobby, who's your pick?
Yeah, we're going to talk about my boy, Jeremy Chinn. Oh, boy, I love me some Jeremy Chinn. Shout out to Daniel Jeremiah, a guy who put me on Jeremy Chinn way back when in the 2020 draft, the old COVID draft. I got a guy like Jeremy Chinn. Man, I think it was late in the third, and was ecstatic because that rookie season for Jeremy Chinn was really, really special. But the special rookie season got soured pretty quick. That sophomore year, that junior year, got pretty rough for Jeremy Chinn there with the Carolina Panthers. We kept drafting him high. We kept expecting him to turn it around. We kept expecting the production to get a little bit better, but it just never did for Jeremy Chinn. He just never reached the heights. The points per game just kind of slacked a little bit. That 13.5 points per game in 2020 just kind of, I don't know. It came out of nowhere, to be honest with you. I mean, we all expected a good rookie season, but I didn't expect that. But then went to 11.6 points per game in 21, 10.6 in 22, 4.1 in 23, 11.2 in 2024. So he was good with Dan Quinn last year in Washington. I kind of expected them to maybe try to retain a guy like Jeremy Chinn. I felt like he fit the role there for a safety in Dan Quinn's defense really, really well. But for whatever reason, couldn't get a contract to work out. Went to Oakland. And the reason I really like Jeremy Chinn for 2025 is not so much because Jeremy Chinn is just some elite athlete. He's just going to rack up a ton of tackles or anything for us. But it's really the linebackers that are there in front of him. I don't think there's a lot of talent there. Now Christian Wilkins is a little bit banged up, I think I saw the other day. He's not super healthy. We'll see what a guy like Maxx Crosby looks like. Jeff, we'll talk about your other edge defender there for Oakland. Sorry, not Oakland. Gosh, did I say Oakland already once? That's the old way in my brain that can't get out. Las Vegas.
Liquid Death, it's getting to you.
That's it. Liquid Death, sponsored by Liquid Death today, the IDP show. But Jeremy Chinn, just a guy that I think could be the LB1 there in Las Vegas. He's not a linebacker. He's not a linebacker anywhere in any system that I really know of. But I think he could just mop up a lot of ugly tackles that a lot of those Las Vegas linebackers are going to miss this year. That's really the only reason that I wanted to talk about a guy like Jeremy Chinn this year. I think the ADP and I think what he's going to do for us as far as points per game could be back to the normal Jeremy Chinn that we're used to.
No, I like that call just because, like you said, the linebackers up until a week ago when they signed Gerald Pratt, we were looking at the resurgence of Devin White for the 13th time.
Yeah.
Like no one's liking that. And then the Landon Roberts, like if there is ever a definition of a jag in the NFL, it's a Landon Roberts 2-down thumper. Yep. And that's about it. You're not going to get him on 3, so the linebackers there were looking pretty ugly. And now with Pratt there, it's looking a little better. Like he'll probably be the one linebacker, but there's still going to be a need for a second.
Yeah, a little better, not much. But yeah, you're exactly right. You know, Jermaine Pratt, what does that guy still have left? I mean, he's okay, but you're exactly right. Landon Roberts, he's going to have some fun highlights. He's going to hit some people hard, but he's going to miss a lot of tackles as well. You know, we'll see what a guy like Tommy Eichenberg can do. I don't really know that he's going to see the field very much. I mean, there's a possibility, but it's just going to be a messy year for Las Vegas, and I think Jeremy Chinn is going to he's going to have a role there for Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. What a weird sentence to say.
Is there a scenario where the Vegas Raiders aren't done signing free agent linebackers? We know we still have Kaiser White is still out there. We still have a Kendricks out there. Is there a world, you know, we get to middle of July OTAs, or not OTAs, excuse me, but training camp start. They bring in a guy, because it's weird to me that those two guys are still available, you know, here in the almost end of June.
Mm-hmm. You know, the other thing too is there's always some surprise cuts in training camp. You know, there's always kind of some veterans or some guys that are just not really panning out that end up getting cut. And I think there's a very real possibility that the Raiders get into camp and Pete Carroll pretty quickly sees that none of these guys are gonna work out for that defense. And Kendricks would work really nicely for the Raiders. And I don't think that really kills. I don't think there's any of these guys that are going to come in and kill Chinn's value. No. I don't think those guys are available right now as far as free agency is concerned. But what I've learned in IDP is to don't write anything, you know, in stone early on in June, because lots of things can change, you know, and you know that better than anybody, Jeff. You keep a pulse on the training camp buzz better than anybody in IDP. You know, you'll have your daily minute or weekly minute. I don't remember how often you were updating over the last couple of years, but you're the guy to follow on Twitter for sure. If anybody's looking for the training camp buzz, you keep up with it. But yeah, 32 beat reporters is a good one to follow this time of year, because you know those signings, as far as linebackers are concerned, sometimes it's the first one to them is the one that gets them. And man, Kendricks would be really fun in Vegas. Now that you put that in my head, I'm going to have a hard time getting that out.
I've done a lot of that today between disc golf and golf, and now, So, all right, I'm going to chat about you kind of alluded to it earlier. We're going to go with a little Malcolm Koonce here. Unfortunately, we don't have any stats from 2024 because he suffered an injury. So if we go back to 2023, he played 501 snaps. He had a very impressive 81.3 PFF score, 8 sacks, 10 hits, 34 hurries, and 30 tackles. So finally healthy again, a former third-round pick, so he does have that, you know, draft capital back in 2021. He was seen at OTAs earlier this month doing some drills, which is always really encouraging for a player coming back off an injury for me, because OTAs are a time when the veterans, if they're not feeling 100%, don't have to do anything. They just kind of show up and don't participate. But for him to go through some drills and things like that, I think that's a really good sign for him being healthy. Anytime you play opposite of Maxx Crosby, it's going to make your life a lot easier. You mentioned like hopefully getting Christian Wilkinson back. He kind of is going through this weird, like, I might need to have surgery again.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to play through it kind of deal, which is never a good sign. But I just think that team is probably going to be a little more competitive this year. And we saw a really fun run to Koonce's 2023 season before he got injured. Right there at the end of the season, he was kind of like in that end of his third-year player. He was kind of an ascending player and then got hurt. So I know he was a player that we had made a deal on in a league that we share together. I got Malcolm Koonce and Jalen Hunt. And I was kind of, why am I getting an opportunity to get Malcolm Koonce here? So was it just a depth piece move, or
what was the deal? What was the deal? Let's give it to him live. Do you remember?
I believe it was Jalen Hunt and Malcolm Koonce for a second.
A second. Was that it? Was there no players involved? Did I get anybody back? You can pull it up.
I think so. I can pull it up really quick here.
Yeah, Koonce is interesting. He kind of fits in that mold of like Jonathan Grenard, we saw the little flash like kind of early on in their career. I think 2023 was actually Koonce's third year in the NFL. What did he have? Like 8 sacks in a 9-game span, I think, to finish 2023. So there was definitely enough of that pop that was just a wow. What in the world could the Raiders have here in Malcolm Koonce? It's just a guy that I'm just not willing to bank on it working out long term. If it does, great. I'm liable to get screwed in a bunch of these trades. But he's just a guy that I'm just not sure, A, he can stay healthy, and B, it can just be a guy who you want to link arms with long term in IDP. I'll be happy if he does, if he produces well. I've got some Koonce shares in some other leagues as well because he was free 99 for the last couple of years. If you've held on to Malcolm Koonce since 2023, good on you. If not, maybe go pick him up. I mean, there's a chance that a guy like this is available on waivers because everybody's going to talk about Crosby. Everybody's going to talk about Christian Wilkins. Everybody's going to talk about Jeremy Chinn. But Malcolm Koonce is liable to have flown under the radar and could be just a free ad for you. But he's going to play this year.
Yep. And so the exact deal was Malcolm Koonce, Jalix Hunt, and a fourth.
Okay.
Receiving back a second and Braylon Smith. So.
The Brashard Smith, the running back there for the Chiefs. So I do have Pacheco, so I wanted a little bit of a handcuff there for my boy Isaiah. But yeah, the second, that's fine. That's a pretty good. Either one of them's fine. There's a world where Jalix Hunt or Malcolm Koonce can work out, but I don't know. I'm gonna bank against it. I like your guy Malcolm Koonce. I'm not crapping on your trade, in front of the whole world. But there's a world it doesn't work out also.
That's right. And that is a league where we can start up to 6 defensive linemen. So, that's a very deep league. So,
yeah.
The Super Bowl is the biggest event in sports, but Jalen Carter makes big plays and very few fantasy gamers care. That's going to change with the D-Up contest on Fast Draft. You draft 6 defenders. The top 4 enter your lineup every week. You can draft up to 30 teams. There's a $10,000 prize pool. And if you love Aiden Hutchinson, you can get big exposure to that guy. And every time he's making plays for the Lions, you're making money. It's such an easy game to play, and it's so fun to sweat both sides of the ball on Sundays. Of all the Fast Draft contests, it's the D-Up game that I think is going to really change how people play fantasy. Now use your host promo code to get a $50 deposit match when you deposit on Fast Draft. So, let's start drafting faster.
Yeah. All right. Well, so until I get roasted some more, let's move on to the Los Angeles Chargers, not the San Diego Chargers anymore.
Yeah. Thank you,
Jeff.
Appreciate that.
No problem. We're going to go with we're each going to take a linebacker here. And so, Bobby, you took Daiyan Henley.
Yeah. Let's do them at the same time. Let's talk about them together. Let's have a little battle here. Who's going to produce more for us in IDP this year? I'm going to give you a little bit of the reason why I think Daiyan Henley is. I mean, how many dang, double-digit tackle games does a guy have to really show you that he's for real? And then again, in the playoffs, 10 tackles against Houston. Gosh, Daiyan Henley, what's there not to like? Had a sack last year, had probably 8 double-digit tackle games, finally has arrived. I mean, why should I be worried about Junior Colson coming and taking Daiyan Henley's job?
You shouldn't be at all worried about Colson coming in and taking him. The only thing that with Henley is, wasn't there a game like right at the end of the season where he didn't do anything?
No,
wasn't that
he didn't feel good that week. He didn't feel good that week. He had a little bug. It's like December,
that was in the championship
January.
game for
Everybody's
kind of
sick. Everybody's kind of sick that time of year. It's just a rough time of year to be playing linebacker. You are right. He played a lot of snaps and had 0 tackles, so that was kind of a head scratcher. But he did make it up to us in the playoffs. But Junior Colson, Jeff, what am I missing out on?
So yeah, there is no sugarcoating last season how terrible it was. Anytime you think that a rookie linebacker is going to come and produce, just remember Junior Colson, because he had legit everything that you couldn't have scripted a better scenario for a player coming in. Mm-hmm. Drafted early, going into a situation where they needed linebackers, going to play for his former college coach. Like, you could not have scripted anything better. Like all he had to do was beat out Henley, but he kind of he was a revelation last year and stuff like that. But yeah, so there really is no sugarcoating why he was so terrible
last year.
Yeah, and I know that he came back. The team brought him back again this year. So Perryman is there, and the dude's 32 years old. So like, if he can't beat out Perryman, then the writing's on the wall for him. But I think he might be a really great buy low target right now, just because so many managers who invested in him kind of maybe are soured on him. And so maybe getting him at a reduced price right now, like if you can work him into a part of a bigger deal, that might be a player to add in. I think they're going to try to run 2 linebackers this year, more so there than in the past. There really isn't anything more than just a buy low opportunity to get in on Junior Colson right now. The draft capital's there. Harbaugh's going to want to make it work just because he's his guy from Michigan. But other than that, like there isn't anything PFF wise. He had a 38 PFF grade, which is about as red as you can get. No sacks, 1 hit, 4 hurries, 28 tackles. So there's only upside to go for Colson this year. But yeah, Henley is definitely going to be the guy there, a strong LB1 candidate week in and week out. But if you can get Colson on the cheap, and he's rolling out there as your LB3, LB4, I think you can probably do a little bit worse as a lottery ticket this time of year.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on there, Jeff. I don't really think it's a this or that. I think that with Colson, you're going to get a discount, obviously, because the production hasn't been quite what Daiyan Henley's is. But I think there's a world where you're exactly right. They play more 2 LB sets, and Colson and Henley can both eat. I think Henley is a better linebacker than, honestly, I anticipated him being coming out of college. I believe Henley was the one that played a bunch of different positions. He maybe transitioned from wide receiver or quarterback, maybe. I can't remember. He's got a weird world to the NFL. But Henley picked up on NFL offenses, and I think it made a little bit more sense to him last year. His play got a little bit better, but you're right. Colson, man, he had an opportunity to playing time last year, and they gave him a little bit of playing time, but the production was just not there. I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping it's a Harbaugh thing to where he brings his guy in from Michigan and just lets him have another opportunity in 2025, because I do think Junior Colson could actually be a good linebacker for us in IDP. But, boy, it's risky.
Well, and even thinking about last year, Kenneth Murray was there, and Kenneth Murray had a pretty solid season next to Henley. So I can see a world where, Colson just kind of walks in and fills in that Kenneth Murray role. And Kenneth Murray, I think, was a solid LB2 last season. So
yeah, we'll see about Henley. I guess Henley is kind of one that now that you bring him up, I'm head scratching a little bit more on as far as would I trade him right now in Dynasty. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm gonna have to put a pin in that one. Henley's one we'll have to discuss on the pod quite a bit, because the ADP is getting up there, and Henley is a guy that people are starting to really draft pretty highly in the best balls and in the fast drafts and everything. So that's going to be an interesting setup to watch for Colson and for Henley this year.
Before we switch over to the NFC teams,
yeah,
Bobby, you brought up a great point about what would you be willing to trade for? I've been kind of in this mindset the last couple of seasons about treating my IDP world more redraft-ish, being more willing to move on from players, just because of that repeatability, like you've seen time and time again with players flashing one season and kind of fading the next, and just being able to cash in and maybe trying to find that next Daiyan Henley piece.
Yeah.
What's your thought on an approach like that?
It's a risky world to try to mess with, It's very similar to Kenneth Murray, like you were talking about. Kenneth Murray was actually with the Titans last year. Is that right? Yeah, he was a Titan.
Oh,
he was a Charger in 2023. So, you're kind of always tiptoeing that line of, do I trade this guy and hope that I'm getting profit right now in IDP? Because that's what we talk about. Adam will talk about it regularly. I'll talk about it on the show. Can you make a profit in IDP? Can you turn a guy like Daiyan Henley into potentially another Henley plus an offensive piece? Can you go get, a backup running back who might have an opportunity down the road? Can you go get a NFL round 4 wide receiver, a guy like Pat Bryant? Could you go get a Isaac Tesla? Could you go get a guy who might have an opportunity at some point in the NFL? I am more prone to moving linebackers than I am the Malcolm Koonces of the world. Sometimes the Koonces are the ones that are hard to come off of, because what happens if Koonce turns into Jonathan Grenard and then all of a sudden now you've got an edge too for your team in IDP? You're going to be a little bit bummed that you moved a guy like Koonce. Whereas linebackers are so easy to come by. I mean, here we are fresh off of a season where Zach Bond was the LB1. Zach Bond, a guy who's been in the league for years now and is just a cast-off. I mean, I guarantee you, whoever had Zach Bond in 2024 picked him up off waivers. Nobody was rostering Zach Bond going into last season. So if you can make a profit on these linebackers, I am more apt to do it than not, because the odds of them working out are pretty low. And also the availability or the possibility of going and adding a free linebacker somewhere, either via waivers or some trade where you just shoot off somebody a 4th or a 5th for an Omar Speights, for just a really deep dart throw linebacker that has the potential to get playing time. They might not be good, but can they get 70, 80, 90% of snaps next year and actually have some relevance in IDP? That's kind of the world that I feel like with the IDP show we're wanting to live in a little bit more so in 2025. Now, our answer in 2019, 2020, 2021, when we've started the pod might have been a little bit different. We might have said hold on to that, elite linebacker, the potential for the Daiyan Henley to really, enter into elite NFL linebacking territory. I'm just always kind of going to bank against the odds of a guy like Henley being the next Fred Warner. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And because when you mention like elite linebackers, there aren't Fred Warners, Bobby Wagner's of the world. Those are they're elite Mount Rushmore type players for a reason. Daiyan Henley might be that Mount Rushmore type player, but the odds are definitely against that happening.
Yeah.
For him,
however, how many other linebackers have been in the NFL since Bobby Wagner entered, and how many of those didn't work out? There's a 0.04% chance that the next linebacker drafted is going to be a Bobby Wagner, a Luke Kuechly, a Roquan Smith, a Fred Warner, just one of these elite names that's just going to be good until they leave the league. A Levante David, the stalwart type to the defense that not only has the athletic traits, the physical ability to tackle and to play linebacker, but also the mental ability to run an NFL defense, to be the green dot. There's just good linebackers are hard to come by in the NFL these days. So I'll bank
just
against
the luck of staying healthy too.
Yeah,
so.
Very true. Very true.
All right, let's swip over to the NFC, and we're going to get started with the Arizona Cardinals.
Let's do it.
And one of those Mount Rushmore type players for the defensive backs, Bobby, you going to talk a little Buddah Baker?
I sure am. And I got to give Adam a little bit of credit for Buddah Baker, because Addy's been drafting little Buddah here in the last couple weeks, and I've kind of done a little head scratcher. It's kind of made me kind of wonder what's going on in that old brain of Adam's, which is a scary world to get in every once in a while. But Buddah has been great. His whole NFL career, Buddah Baker, has just been really, really good for us in IDP. But I feel like we're maybe to the point to where we're forgetting Buddah a little bit too much. I feel like the Buddah world, the best of Buddah potentially is yet to come. You look at the last couple seasons in 2020, 14.8 points per game for a DB is fantastic. but it slacked a little bit. In 2021, 11.7 points per game, 11.8 in 22, 9.1 points per game in 23, but then 14.3 points per game in 2024. It ticked back up. If you look at the game log for Buddah, it's really, really fun. Look at that 18 tackle week against Seattle in week 14. 18 tackles for a defensive back is crazy. But he also had multiple games of 12 tackles per game. He had another 15 tackle game in week 4 against Washington. Buddah Baker, man, is just a baller. That kid can play ball. Their linebackers are much like Vegas, to where it's not going to be a great setup in front of him. That defensive line is going to struggle some this year. Jalen Thompson and Buddah Baker are going to rack up a bunch of tackles. So much like Jeremy Chinn, I see Buddah Baker is not only a value right now, I feel like, in Dynasty because he's getting a little bit older, but just a baller that I don't want people in IDP to forget.
Yeah, good call. He was definitely a piece. I had a couple shares of Baker last season, and he was really a difference maker. Anytime you can get a positional advantage, and like you said too, it's that consistency piece at a very inconsistent position where you're gonna make the most hay. It's on the offensive piece. We always look at the tight end. How many more points are you getting at your tight end position over your competition? And on the defensive side, I feel that where are you getting your points on the defensive back spot is probably your differences there, because the investment is really low, but the reward is really high. And a player like Baker being consistent like that, that's going to be, come talk to us in January when you're hoisting the hardware. So.
Oh, good call. Good call. He is a difference maker. I will agree with you. I think that's well said, Jeff, that he can win you weeks. And at the defensive back position, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, he's probably one of those rare players, too, that will be going in those D-up drafts as a defensive back, maybe in those 5th, 6th rounds. We don't see many defensive backs going, but he could probably be one of them that would be justifiable.
Yeah, you throw a little boost towards him. You throw him a little 1.5, 2 times boost on D-up. Man, some of those special weeks for him could be week-winning performances for you. So that's a good pull. He's one of the top, he's one of 5 DBs maybe that we really want to be drafting in D-up. But in Dynasty, I think Buddha's a name we need to recircle back to. He's only 29 years old, and assuming health, because he is a small guy, 5'10", but assuming health, man, if Buddah can play like this for another 3 or 4 years in Dynasty, that's a fun window for us to look at. But what about the defensive line, Jeff? We know Buddha's got the back end covered. Can the new addition of your guy here help the Cardinals win against my Rams in 2025?
Well, it definitely can't hurt, because Arizona needed pass rushers in the worst way. We saw him throw a bunch of darts in the draft the last couple seasons on the defensive line, and here they brought in Josh Sweat as a free agent, brought him over from Philadelphia. I don't think his stats really reflect who he is as a player. I think playing in that very loaded Philadelphia defensive line room, didn't really have a chance to really truly break out, but he did play 622 snaps last season. He did have a very efficient 75.7 PFF grade, 8 sacks, 9 hits. He had 34 tackles and only 1 miss. So having that really high tackle floor is something, like you had mentioned to earlier with Karlaftis, we didn't see, but playing in Arizona, he's definitely going to get the opportunity. And if you can contain that high tackle floor from week to week, he's definitely going to be a really fun player this season. He's a player going into his 8th year, so he knows the ins and outs of the NFL. He's been a solid starter on a very good defense, and I think that he's looking to kind of make a name or establish himself apart from, I'm just part of the Philadelphia Eagles room. I can be my own player. He comes into the Cardinals desperately needing playmakers. They need to kind of show these young kids how to play. I love the fact that they also brought in Calais Campbell. He can kind of work on that interior. They drafted Walter Nolan. They brought in last year a player, end of the first round, Demarius Robinson. So definitely have a lot of investment on the interior piece, a lot of attention drawn on those guys. And now players like on the outside, like Sweat, can kind of make some hay. He only did have 1 double-digit sack season in his career, but like I mentioned, playing in Philadelphia kind of suppresses that a little bit. So yeah, I think that we're off to a great start here with Sweat. He only had one season in his entire 7-year career where he hasn't played more than 650 snaps. And so got a lot of snaps. We got a lot of opportunity. So yeah, I think the sky's the limit here for Sweat. I think he can be a player that definitely is better now being away from Philadelphia than he was in Philadelphia's regime. So
yeah, man, Sweat is an interesting one. Do I like Sweat? I don't know. We're going to find out whether he's good or not, because you're exactly right. Josh Sweat was a very rotational piece there for the Eagles. He really only saw 60 to 70% snap share just because that was kind of the player that he was. The tackle floor is a little bit low because he was more of a second and third down rusher. He didn't play a lot of early downs. So we'll see pretty early on what the program is for Arizona. Are they going to leave Josh Sweat out to maybe help his tackle floor some, because he had a lot of 1-tackle, 2-tackle games, which is a little bit disappointing. You're right. The talent is there, but he's a little bit Will McDonald-ish for me. He's a little bit of a one-trick pony, to where if he doesn't get you a sack, the tackles, the forced fumbles, the fumble recovery is just not really going to back up and help you out if he doesn't get to the quarterback that game. So much like Montez Sweat, I really was excited for Montez Sweat going to the Bears because I thought he was going to enter a whole new realm of his career and get a whole lot better, and he really just didn't. I'm worried that Josh Sweat could follow suit. He's going to have all the opportunity in the world, and pretty quickly in 2025, we're going to find out what type of player Josh Sweat really is. So I'm not overdrafting Josh Sweat. If he falls to me, I'll take him, but I don't want to hook up to Josh Sweat for too long, because I've lived that life, and it's a little bit frustrating at times.
I think the investment right now is very minimal. He's probably available on some waiver wires. He's rostered in only 50% of sleeper leagues right now. So looking at a player like that, I think he's a great dart throw here in June. Again, maybe a player just get thrown in on a deal, no investment really on him. But if he takes off and has, a DN2 season, I think you're really happy with that production for somebody that you're not expecting anything from.
I like that.
All right, inching closer to the Los Angeles Rams. We got to stop in San Francisco first.
Yeah.
And Bobby, you picked a stud.
Yeah, I did. I did pick a stud. You're right. Also, Jim Schwartz. That was the defensive coordinator there for the Eagles that kept sweating that rotational piece. Sorry, it took me a minute to pull that. I had to have the help of the old Googles over here. But yeah, Nick Bosa, elite, right? We're talking about that top 10 tier. We're talking about those 8 to 12 guys in IDP that we don't ever want to trade. Could you buy Nick Bosa right now? I think you could. I think a lot of people are just kind of tired of a guy like Nick Bosa. There was a little point in Myles Garrett's career a couple years ago where I felt like people were just kind of bored of Myles Garrett. Just the whole hum. This guy's going to get me another 15 sacks this year. I'm getting kind of bored of him, Let me go get a new, young, hot edge and move on from Myles Garrett. What are we doing? Nick Bosa, I feel like, is in that same light right now. He's going as the, I don't even know, like edge 8 back end of some of these D up drafts. I've seen him in like pick 10, pick 12 range. What's going on? He's 27 years old. I know he's a couple years in the league. I think he's going into maybe his 7th year in the NFL. But, even last year, he was banged up a little bit at times. I think he missed a couple games last year. But Nick Bosa is just elite. And I feel like Nick Bosa, you could probably kick the tires on a little bit in Dynasty to see if you could acquire him. The last couple years, 2021, he had 17.4 points per game, 20.6 points per game in 22. So that's pretty awesome. That's an elite year. 15.3 in 23, 15.7 in 2024. What are we doing? I know Aiden Hutchinson was on track for like 25 points per game, 30 points per game before he got hurt in 2024. That's not realistic. That's not attainable. That's not a world that we normally live in. 15 points per game from our edge is elite. That's amazing. And I feel like you could go and acquire Nick Bosa right now for maybe a first, maybe plus. Maybe you got to add on a third. If you can acquire Nick Bosa for a first right now, you absolutely go do that. So I'll get off my soapbox. I'll let you talk a little bit, Jeff. I've just I had to kind of get that off my chest. I've seen Bosa's name on the trade block a little bit in a couple leagues. I've seen him, being floated some. I don't understand it. I don't understand that world. Nick Bosa is elite to me.
And the thing I really like, like you had mentioned, Bobby, too, with like the great seasons, 2020, he only played 2 games with the injury, but he bounced back in 2021 and had his massive season. In 2022, he had a great massive season. And the last couple of seasons, we've seen him kind of slide off. I think some of that might have had to do with his defensive coordinator going take a little break to be a head coach in New York. But guess who's coming back as his defensive coordinator this year? We saw the best of Nick Bosa with Robert Saleh there. Now Robert Saleh is back in San Francisco as his defensive coordinator again. And so I can definitely see a world where we get the 2022 version of Bosa back. And, like to be at a 8, 9, 10 spot in a D-up draft and have an opportunity to draft Bosa, that's an easy auto pick in my opinion. So definitely like the call there a lot. I'm going to go to the back end here. I'm going to pick a defensive back. I'm going to go with Ji'Ayir Brown for the San Francisco. He played 886 snaps last season. 405 of those came in the box or in the slot. So that's 46% in that tackle heavy area we really like to see. He had a 64.8 PFF score, 72 tackles. He did miss 12 of them. So if we can clean up that missed tackle opportunity, I think we're going to see a big ascension here in his ranks. He did have 5 pass breakups, an interception, and 2 touchdowns. So that's like a week winning potential there. Talanoa Hufanga is gone. Malik Mustafa might miss some time at the start of the season here with an injury that he suffered late last season. The team brought in some free agent help in the form of Richie Grant and Jason Pinnock, but both guys aren't super efficient, and there's a reason that they were cast off from their teams, last season. So I really think that Brown has a chance to kind of establish himself as the safety to roster here in San Francisco. Another reason I really like Brown this year, as we've mentioned it kind of before with some other teams like the Raiders, is we don't know what's going to happen at the second linebacker spot. Dre Greenlaw signed in Denver. So we kind of have this like Ram situation at linebacker right now in San Francisco going on.
Easy.
Who's going to play? We'll get there. Just fueling the prime of the pump here for you. We don't know who's going to play next to Fred Warner. We've got guys like D Winters. We've got Luke Gifford. I know everyone is in on Nick Martin right now because he's got the rookie hype and stuff like that. But in my opinion, if you have 3 players, you don't have any. So we know for sure Fred Warner is going to be amazing there. But not knowing who's going to be that second linebacker next to him kind of maybe makes Brown an interesting, intriguing play here. We saw, like Jeremy Chinn with the Raiders, maybe kind of sneaking up in the box. We saw 405 snaps last season from Brown, playing almost 50% of his snaps in the box. And that's what we love to see out of our safeties. So, Brown's super cheap to acquire right now, as all defensive backs should be. So, sign me up for that 3-year breakout.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you're right. Be a little careful. I think he's not participating in minicamp because of his ankle right now. But as far as pulls right now for safeties to roster in San Francisco, Ji'Ayir Brown is definitely the guy. You're right. Some guys have departed. Talanoa Hufanga is gone, and Hufanga really came back to a normalcy in the last couple years after he really came into the league and kind of ascended pretty quickly. But Ji'Ayir Brown, the box snaps are great. The production is really good. The playing time is really good as well. So Ji'Ayir Brown, another guy, exactly like you said, Jeremy Chinn-esque, playing in the box. Who's that second LB going to be there for San Francisco? I think that's a fantastic pull, Jeff. I love that. I love that call.
All right. Just one team in the way. Maybe in the real NFC West, this team is in the way. Maybe they're a year or 2 out, but Seattle Seahawks, who are you going to make Evan Ringler happy about with this pick, Bobby?
Yeah, I just kind of want to I want to talk about Uchenna Nwosu. Man, I don't really know that Uchenna's a guy that I want to go get right now because there's other guys on that defensive line that are a little bit more interesting. I just kind of want to talk about that whole situation. Uchenna comes from surely they weren't San Diego at the time. It's been Los Angeles Chargers for a while now. I think Uchenna was a Los Angeles Charger. Surely to God he was not a San Diego Charger. But anyways, had that really good season for the Chargers and then ended up going and playing in Seattle. I can't remember exactly what year it was that they traded for him, but has had a really rough go of it here the last couple of years. Been really banged up, has not really played a ton of snaps for the Seahawks, and has just been kind of disappointing, honestly. Ever since he got up there, ever since he signed that big deal, just hasn't done a whole lot. So, I mean, Jeff, is Uchenna a guy right now that you're going to look at, or is he a guy that's fallen into that Malcolm Koonce type category? Is he a guy that we should have been glad that we traded and got some profit in on and can go and roster a guy like a Jalix Hunt, can go grab one of these dart throw James Pierce Juniors? Is Uchenna going to come back to relevance, or is he going to be just another example of one of these edges that we are glad that we got off of?
2023, I was all in. We were doing all these best ball drafts, and Nwosu was coming off a great season, played 6 games. Super buy low window in 2024. Even get him at a more reduced price. He's going to bounce back. Only played 6 games.
Yeah.
Fool me once, fool me twice. I think I'm out on Nwosu finally. He's a player that like right now he's available in 20s. He's only rostered in 26% of sleeper leagues right now. So I think the general consensus is that, a lot of people are out on him. So if you have an empty roster spot, he's a great stash on your bench. Definitely a throw-in type player, not somebody who you're probably going out looking to acquire, but definitely a player that, if he can just get back to staying healthy, which has been hard for him to do. We go back to his days as a Charger. We had really kind of muddling stats as far as like tackle numbers and sacks numbers. Yeah. 5 sacks was his most. He had his real breakout season in 2022 where he had 66 tackles and 9.5 sacks. So I think if we can get 80% of that, you're probably happy with Nwosu. But sure. I don't know if a manager can trust him right now, like being anything more than a, DL4 stash spot right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think I really just wanted to bring up Nwosu because I just kind of wanted to do a little digging on where he went, and he recently had knee surgery. I think you're right. I don't think that Nwosu ever comes back to any type of IDP relevancy for us. It's just kind of one of those reminders to where I think when you can make a little bit of money on a situation like this, going to Seattle, signing a big deal, kind of like a Josh Sweat, kind of like a Montez. It's just really hard to be a elite defensive end in the NFL. And I just want people to remember that the Maxx Crosbys of the world, they don't grow on trees. Anyways, let's get to the other side of the ball. I don't know who you're obviously not offensively, but the back end, I don't know who I haven't even seen your guy here, Jeff. Who are we talking about for Seattle?
I'm going to go with Tyrice Knight.
All right.
Kind of a breakout linebacker.
Hey,
yeah.
I roster Ernest and Tyrice in the XFL. So, hey, you're not going to hurt me here. Let's hear it. It better be love.
It is definitely love.
All right.
A lot of it has to do with like just the low investment that you probably had to stick in Tyrice Knight. He's probably like a 3rd round pick, 4th round pick last year in rookie drafts, maybe sneaking into that 5th round. Didn't expect a lot from him, but like you'd mentioned with all of the shenanigans that went on with the trades of linebackers across the league last year, Tyrice Knight really put up a really consistent rookie season. And I think the Seahawks kind of noticed that, and they did nothing in free agency in the linebacker spot. They did nothing in the draft to address linebackers. And so really between Ernest Jones and Tyrice Knight, they are it. Yeah. Knight put up 550 snaps last season, a 65.4 PFF grade, which is better than Ernest Jones last season. He had an elite tackle grade of 79.6, 2 sacks, 2 hits, and 6 hurries, 84 tackles as a rookie with only 6 misses. So Mike Woolard found that if you are tackling over 14% of the time of your team, that's solid tackle numbers. Mm-hmm. Knight had 17.2% tackle efficiency, tackle rate last season. So is he going to maintain that? Absolutely not. But we have seen what he can do. I don't see a world where he just disappears and they go to a one linebacker look in Seattle. So that's kind of been their deal. And just the confidence that Seattle coaching staff has in him with not bringing anyone in free agency, not signing anyone, not drafting anyone. Mm-hmm. You know, we only have Drake Thomas, who played 37 snaps last season. I'm not expecting much from him. So the competition is just not there. And so we might be looking, you know, with them drafting Nicky Manwari, we might start to see this Legion of Boom 2.0 in the Emerald City. So his lowest tackle game last season was 4 tackles, but he did have fumble recovery. So he's got the super high tackle floor, very safe week in and week out. And if you have him as your linebacker 3 this season, I think you're going to be really happy. Mr. Woolard even has him as an LB3 ranking at this time of the season.
Yeah,
so
Jeff,
Bobby, what are your thoughts on Mr. Knight? So
I love it. It's a fantastic call. I will say I'm a little bit worried about Ernest Jones to some extent, not necessarily from like a losing his job type category, but my concern is obviously with his running mate there, Tyrice Knight. Let me give you some stats I pulled. Tyrice Knight averaging 11.87 points per game in the final 10 games compared to 12.3 points per game for Ernest Jones. Despite the similar finishes for those guys in a points per game perspective, the market is still way more bullish on a guy like Ernest Jones. He's being drafted as the LB10 right now in Fast Draft and in Sleeper, whereas Knight is going as the LB40. 30 linebackers later and almost 75 overall players later. Jones is the player 25 off the board. Tyrice Knight as the player 103 overall off the board. So at LB10, I'm worried that Ernest Jones is being taken a little at his ceiling. That's a little bit kind of at where his peak is right now. And I'm like you. I'm glad that Seattle did not add a lot of names via free agency or the draft. They basically have said it's going to be Ernest Jones and Tyrice Knight in the foreseeable future, honestly, 2025, 2026. But given the gap in ADP, being the Ernest Jones stan, nobody has tweeted or loved Ernest Jones saving Christmas historically for us over the last several years more than IDP Bob. I wouldn't fault anybody, honestly, to pass on Ernest Jones in drafts and to scoop up Tyrice Knight in best balls, dynasties, all situations. I think Tyrice Knight is a full go. So I love that call.
The one thing I really like about it is people are going to say, well, they didn't play together. Like Ernest Jones and Knight didn't play together. But we didn't really start to see Tyrice Knight really play until like week 11.
Yeah.
And so Ernest Jones was, you know, on his like 13th team by this time last season. You know, he was on the team. He was definitely there. So we've seen both of them on the field at the same time. And all Tyrice Knight did in his final 8 games was have 3 double-digit tackle games with his lowest, like was with 4, like I said. So that tackle floor is there for the taking. Now I know with Nicky Manwari being there and Julian Love there, and they've got Kobe Bryant, maybe we're going to see a few more 3 safety looks. And I'm going to guess that Knight would probably be the linebacker that comes off the field in those, but still putting up that tackle efficiency rate that he did last season. He's got a nose for the football. I'm like you. I'm very happy to tear down to get a player like Knight and probably be better off statistically for my team in the long run.
Yep, absolutely. I love that call, Jeff.
All right. Now it's time. Everyone's been waiting for this.
Man.
Sponsored by Liquid Death. We have the Los Angeles Rams. So sit back and enjoy. Bobby, the soapbox is yours.
Man, who should we talk about? Should we talk about Braden Fisk? Should we talk about Jared Verse, Byron Young? We could even
Kobe
talk
Turner.
a little Nate Landman, Kobe Turner. We could talk a little Josiah Stewart, another edge that the Rams brought in that I think could
Cameron
eat into
Curl.
Cam Curl. Gosh, we could talk about lots of them, but instead we're going to talk about a guy named Quentin Lake. Man, I like Quentin Lake. I think that a guy like Quentin Lake could really take a step in 2025. I think it started to click for him a little bit last year. 9.3 points per game is keeping the value suppressed to some extent. He's not some guy that officially entered the league. He's a double-digit points per game guy for us in IDP, so he's all of a sudden, triggering a bunch of people to overvalue him, to overdraft him a lot of the best balls. His dynasty value is not a ton, but I think Quentin Lake is learning the role more. He is going into his 4th season in the NFL. He's going to be looking for a contract here soon coming up. And, man, we've talked about a lot of teams here today that have bad linebacking play. And as much as I love my Rams, 2025 is going to be a rinse and repeat of 2024, I feel like. Nate Landman is still not a very good linebacker. We're going to talk about a better one here in just a little bit. So Quentin Lake is going to fall in line of these Ji'Ayir Browns, who Fred Warner's great, but who's the LB2 going to be for them? Who's going to be behind Tommy Eichenberg and Devin White? Well, Jeremy Chinn is. Who's going to be behind? I think Daiyan Henley's good, but who's going to play behind Junior Colson, a guy who's still learning the role in the NFL? Well, Derwin James is. Quentin Lake is going to be a defensive back that I feel like is going to be a lot more relevant in 2025 than he was in 2024. He only had 4 double-digit tackle games in 2024, so that's a little bit of a bummer. But the overall production was fine. He had 2 sacks, which shows that they're using him in the box some. They're using him on some special packages to get to the quarterback. I love that ability. I love that you have 2 sacks. It means that you can get to the quarterback. They have special roles for you to, a little delayed blitz or whatever from time to time off the edge, potentially up the middle. I would like for some interceptions. I'd like a couple forced fumbles, some fumble recoveries, but I think that's something that kind of can come with time for Quentin Lake. So it should say a lot that the Rams fan is not talking about the big name Rams. We can talk about Jared Verse all we want to. As Jalen Ramsey entered that star role for the Rams several years ago before he went to Miami, which that's also another little aside. Maybe Jalen Ramsey coming back to the Rams is a possibility in 2025. So put a pin in that one. But Quentin Lake, I think, from a production perspective, but also from a where he lines up perspective, if all of a sudden we hear in camp Quentin Lake star role playing in the box around the line of scrimmage just like he did more in 2024, oh my gosh, I think Quentin Lake's value could really rise. Am I out of what is it? Josh says my head over my skis here. Is that right? Jeff, what do you think? Right.
I'm with you. My head is further ahead of the skis then because I think you put me on to Quentin Lake last year, probably about this time last year. And what I really liked about him was that he's playing a lot of that nickel, that slot cornerback position, where we love that line of scrimmage. He's getting those opportunity to get sacks. We know that Cam Curl and Cam Kitchens are probably going to be the 2 deep safeties or the 2 strong and the free safety there. But, the more I get into this IDP thing, you can have your strong side, your weak side linebackers, and you can have your strong side safeties and your free safeties. But man, those nickel corners are kind of where it's at. They're near the line of scrimmage. They're getting opportunities. What did Lake have? 111 combined tackles last season, something like that, like over 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, that's talk about a floor, and like we mentioned before.
Yeah, you're right. 111 tackles, 5 passes defended, and 2 sacks.
And if you can give me a player like Lake, I can slot in as one of my defensive backs who's got that really high floor. That gives me a little creativity as my second one. I can shoot, I can gamble, like depending on my matchup, if I'm going up against a team who's kind of a juggernaut and I need to hit a home run, maybe I'm going to sprinkle in like, hey, I need a high upside defensive back this week. I'm going to throw a Ji'Ayir Brown and maybe he gets a pass breakup and an interception, like that. But Lake's high tackle floor just gives you that consistency from week in and week out. And I'm with you. I think Lake is a great call this year. And I don't see the Rams switching up their defense too much. They're getting some great production out of their young guys up front. Everybody that we mentioned, Fisk, Verse, Kobe Turner, all those guys are going to continue to do what they do. And then that's only going to create more opportunities. And if they get a player, like you mentioned, if they can somehow get a trade back and all of a sudden get, another piece of their secondary, a solid piece, maybe more name at this point in his career, that's only going to make that defense even better. So
absolutely. I love that. Thank you for the reassurance, Jeff. Appreciate that. That's what I'm here for.
That's what I'm here. That's what I'm here for. Yep. So I need maybe a little reassurance on this, because this is going to be a storyline that's probably going to be maybe one of the most talked about all off season, heading up to the start of the season, is going to be who's going to be the linebacker to roster in LA. Ever since the Rams moved on from Ernest Jones, it's kind of been this rotating door at the position. They have shown that the Rams, I don't know if they truly know their talent better than anyone, or they just think that they're smarter than anyone, but they're not willing to pay up for the linebacker. We saw that with Ernest Jones looking for a contract. He got moved out to Tennessee, then moved on to Seattle. Now we're looking at this linebacker room. Troy Reeder, Nate Landman, rookies Chris Paul Jr., who Jay Colhagen really likes as a stash. He's got some love for him. Mm-hmm. Undrafted free agent Shane Dolak, who is probably Ivan Pace 2.0, kid out of Buffalo, and then Omar Speights. So to me right now, Speights seems like the guy that interests me the most out of any of this group. We kind of know what we have in Troy Reeder. We kind of know what we have in Nate Landman. And obviously the rookies haven't played a lick in the NFL yet. So Speights to me kind of right now seems to be the leader in the clubhouse as far as who I'm going to try to put my chip on. Speights had a better PFF grade than any of the other players last season with a 66.8 grade. He was excellent in pass rushing run defense with a 78.3. So that's like high watermark. That's like top 10. In elite tackle grade of 79.2. He had 56 tackles on 419 snaps. That's 14% tackle rate. And then we mentioned earlier, anything north of 14% tackle rate is fantastic. So the only thing that's missing right now for Speights having that stranglehold on the position is just the number of snaps. Is he going to get that 80, 85, even 90% snap share that we really are hoping to see out of our linebackers? Speights was an undrafted free agent himself. He took advantage of that COVID year, so he played 5 years in college. So the draft capital doesn't scream, hey, this is me. But the investment from the team, there really isn't an investment for the Rams. They have shown that they're not going to pay that position. They can pay down and put their money somewhere else. So if he's my LB4, LB5 on my bench right now, I'm happy taking that risk. If I'm counting on him to be a starter right now as my LB3, I'm probably going to start looking elsewhere just to kind of get a little safer spot. What are your thoughts there, Bobby, on Speights?
No, I love it. I think Speights is pretty free everywhere. He's available probably on a lot of waivers. I literally just checked while you were talking and put a waiver request in for Speights in a league. He should not be sitting out there because it's going to be Omar Speights. It's not going to be Nate Landman. It's not going to be Pooh Paul, as a lot of people call him. Chris Paul may end up working out, but I think it's going to be much like Omar Speights, to where you're only going to see snaps for Chris Paul, I think, later on in 2025, if ever. I don't think Nate Landman is a great linebacker. I mean, he's going to be some depth, but I think he's going to be much like a Troy Reeder, like one of these guys that's just kind of an extra as needed. I mean, maybe he'll play some early run defense downs, but I think Omar Speights is going to be the guy. I think he's going to be the green dot. We saw as the year went on, the Rams finally took the leash off of Speights a little bit more and kind of let him run, let him stay on the field a little bit longer. He was one of a few amount of rookie linebackers actually last year that saw more than 500 tackles. I think I had seen somewhere the other day where Sports Illustrated wrote up Speights as a breakout player for 2025. I think that Chris Shula is going to be very dependent on Speights, not only knowing the defense and being the green dot, but also clearly being the green dot and staying on and being a 3-down linebacker. So I think Speights is one of the best buys right now because I don't think he's elite. I don't think he's some crazy talent that's going to win you your league. I just love him because he's forgotten about. People are really already moving on to other things in IDP, or who is this next batch of rookie linebackers, and Speights is just being forgotten about. The dynasty value is really low. The cost to acquire is going to be very minimal for a guy like Omar Speights. And if you lived the Omar Speights life last year, just settle in, because I think it's just going to be even better in 2025 than it was last year. So I love the call, Jeff. I think we could have sat here and waxed poetic about Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, all the defensive linemen that we want to, but maybe two of the most slept-on, valuable pieces in IDP are Quentin Lake and Omar Speights for the Rams and in IDP. So great way to wrap up the episode here.
Are you at all concerned about the Rams being one of the teams that roll out one linebacker looks more than anyone? Is Speights going to be that guy, or is there too much trust with Reader not to take him off the field? I don't know.
I think it's Speights. I think they let him kind of earn his keep last year. You know, you look at the postseason even. He didn't do much against Minnesota, but in the divisional round against Philadelphia, 83% of the snaps, 6 tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 20.76 points in Big Three scoring. What's not to love there? I mean, he had several double-digit scoring games in Big Three scoring last year on what I would consider is pretty minimal playing time. I mean, he's hovering around the 50, 60, 70% snap share last year for the Rams, coming off the field quite a bit. So what's going to happen is in training camp, when Jordan Rodriguez goes ahead and sends out the tweet that it's looking like it's Omar Speights, you're done. You can't acquire this guy anymore, because you're exactly right. The Rams over the last couple years with Raheem Morris and then even with Chris Shula have been a one linebacking defense. That's primarily the look that they roll out. What happens when you let that cat out of the bag and it's Omar Speights? The run to the waiver wire or the cost to acquire is going to double in one night. So here we are. What is today? June 23rd. Jeff and Bobby are telling you, hey, put some feelers out on Omar Speights, because I guarantee you if he's not free right now, the cost to acquire is going to be very, very minimal. And if we're wrong, if for some crazy reason it's Nate Landman or Troy freaking Reader again, which it's not going to be, great. You burned a 5th. Hey, my bad. I'll accept the apology. But if for some reason Jordan Rodriguez tweets mid-July, early August, Omar Speights is the green dot, you're welcome. You're welcome.
And I think that's kind of been the theme of the show here today, is like thinking about like just some really good values. Jonathan Cooper, Malcolm Koonce, Junior Colson, Josh Sweat, a lot of these names like Quentin Lake, Uchenna Nwosu, like next to nothing as an investment. I don't know if you've done any like looking or prepping of 2026, but 2026 draft doesn't have the luster that we got spoiled with the last couple of seasons. Like, we had the year of the wide receivers, we had the year of the quarterbacks, we had the year of the running backs this last year. Next year is kind of like, there's some quality defensive pieces, but I'm not spending a first or a second probably on a lot of those pieces. So, 2026 is, the year to maybe invest those picks now before most of your league mates kind of realize, ooh, this isn't as fun of a draft as we got spoiled with the last couple seasons.
You're spot on there, Jeff. I feel like the longer that we do this, and I say myself and Adam and Josh, we've done this for a long time, but Jeff, I mean, you've been plugged in with us as long as anybody, So, I mean, you've been here on, the IDP After Show. You've been on the IDP show. Jake Colhagen, Scott, Jace. I mean, as many guests and as many of the hosts that you have on the show, I feel like we're all slowly starting to realize you want to hold on to the top 10 guys. You want to hold on to these Nick Bosas, Myles Garrett, Will Anderson types. You don't want to trade those guys. But the IDP show, that's what we're here for. We're going to help you dig and find the Omar Speights of the world, the Quentin Lakes of the world, the Ji'Ayir Browns. We don't always want to go and overspend for Kyle Hamilton. We don't always want to go and overspend for Jack Campbell. So you're exactly right. I think the longer that we do this in IDP, I said it a couple episodes ago, go and spend your money on the offense. Pay attention to us. We'll help you dig through the IDP well, and we'll help you to pull some of these guys off of waivers or help you send some trades for some of these guys that's just going to be absolutely free. And I've seen that as well in 2026 is that 2026 class as a whole, there's going to be a couple running backs, but as a whole, it looks pretty rough. I'm going ahead and forwarding to Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith wide receivers coming out in 2027. So that's where my mind's at, Jeff. We're in unison here today.
Exactly the same. And, it's a great segue too about the IDP show opening out. Josh had just sent out a tweet the other day about, hey, let's get those trades. They're on the Twitter machine or X or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it. Post those trades. Get it talked about on the IDP trade show. You guys are going to be taking those calls and taking those tweets and answering those kind of questions. So now's the great time to capitalize because definitely championships are won in the offseason truly in dynasty leagues, and this is the chance to capitalize on those players that you can get for a 4th and 5th, and by this time next year they're 2nd or a 3rd. That's how you win. So
yeah, absolutely. Plug in the IDP show, the IDP After Show. Go to the IDPshow.com. We've got ranks, we've got best ball ranks, we've got articles, we have trade calculators. We've got a dadgum trade show that's coming up here pretty soon. So nobody digs harder. Nobody grinds more than the IDP show, Jeff, yourself included as well. So y'all plug in, pay attention this time of year because we're starting to get fun. Here soon it's going to be actual training camp, and the news is going to be quick and fast, and it's going to be back to normal for the 2025 season. We're going to be ready for it. So, Jeff, this has been a good time, buddy. I hope you've had as much fun as I have.
Oh, I definitely have, and I appreciate you coming on. I know you could have been out disc golfing or mowing.
Yeah,
so I appreciate you taking some time to come on out. Yeah, it should have been. But I appreciate you coming on, talking about some players that we're excited about in the AFC and NFC West for this upcoming fantasy football season. Usually you're sitting on Josh's left. Has there ever been a thought about you sitting on Josh's right just to mix things up a little bit?
Next week, that's what we're doing. I think we're recording either tonight or tomorrow, so I'm going to have to tell Adam. I almost called him Autumn. I miss Autumn. I love fall. I'm a fall guy. I'm not a summer guy. I'm ready for autumn. But yeah, I'm gonna have to change it up a little bit. Kind of throw Josh a curveball. We're getting a little too status quo in here lately. We need to get rid of the Jalen Phillips jersey too. I'm gonna have to make a little purchase. We need to get I need to tweet that out sometime. We need to get a new IDP player in here.
Yeah, maybe it'll bring him some good luck, and maybe he can stay healthy if he was the curse on the wall. So
maybe we might need to put somebody up there we don't like. Somebody we need to get rid of in here. Nate Landman, that's who we're gonna get. Gonna get a Landman jersey. It's Omar Speights season.
Troy Reader.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, Bobby, I appreciate you taking some time coming on. So, anything that you, Josh, and Adam are working on right now? Anything extra behind the scenes that you could drop a little teaser on us?
We're always working on things behind the scene, but nothing that I can think of off the top of my head that you don't already know about. I mean, we're getting into the top 24 defensive backs here pretty soon. We're going to be doing a top 48 linebacker episode on the IDP show pretty quickly. Go to the IDP show, sub the content. You're going to want the ranks. Get in the fast draft. Download the app. I know there's a little $50 deposit match that the IDP show has got going on as well. So we got a little bit of everything going on. We've got some combined best balls. We've got some normal best balls on Sleeper. We're about to get into, just regular redraft season here pretty quickly. So the IDP show, Adam said it a couple weeks ago, we turned the light on in the Sode Shack in 2019 and it hasn't turned off since then. So we're always plugged in. But just like Adam, Josh, myself are, Jeff, we're very appreciative of you. You've always been behind the scenes, been digging the ditches with us. So always thankful to have Boo Bam around when the time comes that our paths cross. It's always been a blessing. So thank you for today.
Well, I appreciate that for saying that. Appreciate that. And so. Whew.
Oh yeah,
All
there
right.
you go.
So with that said, there we go. It's not just the heat, it's sweat, right? So
Sure.
So if that's a great segue too, Bobby. If you're not doing so already, please make sure that you hit that like and subscribe button to all of the shows that are coming out. It really does help out the channel and things like that, as far as the subscriptions. And now is, like we said, now is the time to start capitalizing on those players. Maybe catch a league mate sleeping on a guy, maybe find a gem on the waiver wire that right now might not seem to be a lot of investment, but come December, January, you're glad you did. So
absolutely.
All right, that'll wrap up this show. Next time, I'm going to be joined by a guy named Kyle Bellafuel from from Football Guys, and we're going to be talking about some players that we like from the AFC and NFC North. So be sure you'll be on the lookout for that one dropping very soon. For Bobby and myself, we say thank you for listening, and we'll catch up with you next time.
This was the IDP After Show.